welcome to Mystery Monday number 3. Squash and the Scales of Justice. When the 14th run-through failed as badly as the first, CINCFD-SOP yielded a rare admission of total defeat. CINCFD-SOP, which stands for Commander-in-Chief Foreign Dignitary Security Operations Procedures, was Desmond Malmquist Carver. Junior personnel called him Mr. Carver, sir. He'd have preferred Colonel, but that was officially frowned upon. Agents with seniority called him Sir. No one addressed him in the familiar, except for Gordon Papp, who called him Des, and once Sink, but that was another story. An ex-military man like the rest of the FDSOP branch, Carver was accustomed to success, and what he had just been watching did nothing for his or anyone's sense of well-being. There has to be a way, there just has to be. He looked at his watch, then slapped the table. This meeting's over. Go get something to eat. We'll reconvene at 1900 hours. No, 1905. I'll be in my office. He stood up quickly. Too quickly, as it turned out, because when the crisis team jumped to their feet with him, they knocked the apparatus flying. 2 of them grabbed for the squash balls. Another dropped to his knees hurriedly to retrieve the little weights that had fallen onto the floor. Carver paid no attention. He kicked a tiny 1-gram weight into the corner and walked out, slamming the door. Even before the sound faded, he reopened it. "One of you bring Pap," he commanded. They nodded in unison. In the comfort of his office, Desmond Carver took off his tie and dropped into a chair beneath the picture of a young lieutenant grinning beside the burned-out hull of a North Korean tank. He longed for Korea again. It was so simple then, he thought. HQ would say, "Take the hill." So you shelled it. You led your men up, you took it. Then you led them back down and on to the next one. A bit like the grand old Duke of York, he said to himself with a grin. But still a lot better than this crisis nonsense today. The nonsense today was the general happiness, unfettered comfort, and absolute security of His Esteemed Excellency Chu Lai-Dang, Minister of Justice, squash enthusiast, and most likely successor to the premiership of the People's Republic of China. What made it nonsense to Carver was not the person of Chu Lai-Dang, who had proven himself to be urbane, pleasant, and cooperative. It was the way in which he had to be protected. Chu had to be looked after, no question about that. But it was never to appear that way. It must never appear to anyone, even Chu, that he required protection. Otherwise, he would lose face. Yet FDSOP rated the man Category 7. Even the Queen of England was only Category 5. The crisis was part of tomorrow morning's squash game between Chu and the President. That game, unless FDSOP could prevent it, was going to turn into a diplomatic incident of major consequence. While the President was a top-flight squash player, there was no doubt that Chu would win. He was world-class. That part was all right, however. In fact, the State Department preferred it so. After all, this was squash, not baseball or golf. As long as the President gave Chu a good run, he didn't have to win. The problem, the crisis, was sabotaged equipment. An FDSOP agent had obtained incontrovertible evidence that one of the squash balls they were to use was ever so slightly, but quite deliberately, weighted on one side. It would bounce just a bit off center, just a bit off true, and make both the President and Chu look like fools in front of hordes of media. A jouncing tap on the door startled Carver. "Gordon Pappy, Des," a cheerful voice announced. "Not here. The door opened, then closed, and Gordon Pappy had taken the seat before Carver was even sure what had been going to say. "Heard you needed me," Pappy smiled. He proceeded to dangle his leg comfortably over the arm of the chair. He was oblivious to CINCFD-SOP's fixation with protocol. The squash game? Carver willed himself to be calm. Gordon Pappy was the only non-military type in the branch. He was irreverent and irrepressible, but simply the best agent they had. "How thoroughly have you been briefed?" Carver asked, addressing himself to the desk blotter. The dangling leg was too much for him. "Well, I know about the game, if that's what you mean." Pappy said. But so does the whole world. The rest of it, I'm pretty sketchy on. All this I know is that they... Sorry, I'm going to start again. All that I know is that they might be playing with a wonky ball that would make them both look dumb. I got that from the new kid of yours with the funny haircut. The new kid, Carver's glare was focused at this time, is a former Marine, and the haircut is regulation. Gordon Pappy shifted in his chair so that he could dangle his other leg over the arm as well. Carver cleared his throat. The matter, plain and simple, is that we have to replace one bad squash ball with a normal one. For the first time, Pappy sat up straight. I suppose, he said, it's not just a simple case of palming the bad one and replacing it, is it? No, Carver replied. Number one, the squash balls, including the sabotage one, are being supplied by Chu. Heavy symbolism here. After the game, there's going to be a new trade agreement signed, among other things. China's going to sell us sports equipment. Pappy whistled in appreciation of the situation. Number two, they're already on display in Chu's suite. Have been since he arrived. You'd never be allowed to touch them. Besides, there are 8. You could never check that many without being obvious. Number 3, our information is that you can't tell the bad one from the good one by feel or appearance anyway, or even by picking it up. So nobody knows which one it is? Pappy was becoming seriously interested. All we know is that the weight's a few milligrams more than it should. I see. Is there any good news? There's one piece of sheer luck. Chu is very proud of being a minister of justice. Last year, the Canadian government gave him a balanced scale in 24-karat gold. You know, the blind justice statue? It's a real working scale, and he just loves it, takes it everywhere he goes, and makes sure it's always out where everybody sees it. Pappy was leaning forward now. That means you've got the equipment right there. Why don't you just send somebody in to do the job? For a long time, Desmond Malmquist Carver held his breath. Maybe, he said. Maybe, you can help us here, he swallowed. State has asked for the privilege of carrying the balls from Chu's suite to the court. The Chinese have agreed. They're flattered, in fact. That means I can get one of our people in wearing a gymnasium attendant's uniform. Even if they frisk him, which I doubt, one squash ball in his pocket is going to look normal enough. The problem is, we've been at it all afternoon with a duplicate of Chu's scales. At the absolute outside, our agent has got time to use the scale only for 2 ways. Now, how does he find that ringer using that scale only twice? Pappy turned to lift his leg over the arm of the chair again, and allowed himself to slip down comfortably. You've done a lot of homework, Des, he said, with genuine admiration. Now you want me to be the attendant tomorrow morning, or have you got someone else in mind? Gordon Pappy has a solution. What is it?